and that I will well and faithfully.
Most people who run for political office do so to make a difference. Once they're elected, however, many find that the view from inside the state capitol is a bit different from what they expected or what they campaigned on. Our guests today are some of the Valley's newest state assembly members. We'll find out what they think about a wide range of issues, including what should be done to address the state's $25 billion deficit. What do they think of some of the governor's more controversial proposals, such as the elimination of redevelopment agencies and enterprise zones? What about the governor's proposal asking voters to extend 2009's temporary tax increase for another 5 years? And if they oppose placing a tax question before the voters, what additional $12 to $14 billion in cuts do they support to balance the state budget? What are their ideas about reforming public employee pensions, giving more authority to local governments, and easing government regulations? Where do they stand on important San Joaquin Valley issues like water, high-speed rail, and economic growth? And finally, what do they hope to accomplish before they leave office?
From Fresno, the Maddy Report, with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Mark Keppler.
Welcome. Some say California has become ungovernable. And with an ongoing recession, a crippling housing market, and double-digit unemployment, new legislators will be challenged with no shortage of issues to address. We're fortunate to be joined by some of the region's new state legislators to discuss a wide range of topics. They are Linda Halderman, Republican from Fresno, David Valadao, Republican from Hanford, and Sharon Grove, Republican from Bakersfield. And Kristin Olsen, I'm sorry, excuse me, Kristin Olsen from Modesto, I apologize. While we invited Henry Perea and Sharon Grove to attend, they were unable to join us today. So today we're going to have an all-Republican panel, and that should give us a unique perspective on life in the Capitol with the minority party. So I want to start at the the beginning. You're all new legislators. What are your impressions of Sacramento? Is it what you expected?
Well, I can't say I had a whole lot of expectations. This is the first time I've held elected office. It does surprise me how slow things move. My understanding is we're in a budget crisis, that a $25 billion deficit is a crisis, and yet there doesn't seem to be the sense of urgency that I feel to try and
Even
help.
with that 60-day limit that the governor had put on getting a budget deal together?
It doesn't feel like it, since we are not accomplishing a lot during session, and that's where I feel like we ought to have these discussions publicly.
Okay. David?
I would agree with Assemblywoman Halderman. I guess a little bit as far as what I was expecting. It's not, I guess, as I talked to my predecessor a lot, and I was expecting a little worse. But as far as accomplishing stuff, that's where I would agree with her more. We're not doing a whole lot. We're sitting in session, and there's just not a whole lot of talk. We were rushed through the process. We were hoping for a little more openness, a lot more opportunity to actually find and help the budget crisis. But
could this be a situation where, that 11th hour bargaining, people don't do anything until the last minute? Could that be what's going on here? I
would say that's probably what it is. I mean, we've been here for 3-4 months, so it's still early for us to say this is normal. But it's not what I was hoping for. I mean, I was hoping to have a lot more input, and we're going to keep fighting to make sure we have our input. So.
Okay, Kristin?
Mark, some of it has met my expectations, but much of it, I guess I've been disappointed to find that not very many people, or maybe that's unfair to say, not as many as I would have expected are focused on solutions. I think there are a number of people up there that are focused on talking and playing political games, but I went to Sacramento to focus on solutions that are going to stimulate job growth and improve our economy. So I am hopeful that we can begin to have those more deliberative discussions that are really going to solve our budget problem and improve our economy over the long term.
Well, let me follow up on that. People usually complain about the hyper-partisan nature of politics in Sacramento and elsewhere, and Jerry Brown in his inaugural made a comment about politicians need to put the state first and their party second. Do you see that happening in Sacramento, or is it as partisan as ever?
I think it depends on the legislator you talk to. Certainly it's a partisan environment. It's inherently partisan. But I think there are individual legislators who believe that we're there to govern and to lead and to bring California to a better place. So I think there are those individuals up there, I count myself as one of them, who are trying to change the dynamics in Sacramento to be one of more governing than just partisan politics as usual.
Hyper-partisan in Sacramento?
Well, there's always those. There's 80 different members in my house, and I'm going to try to focus on finding the ones that I can work with and obviously working with them. The ones that are going to be a little more difficult, I'm going to look even harder to find where we can get along and come up with a solution that works for both of us. But I don't want to play the partisan game.
Linda, is it hyperpartisan in Sacramento?
I've found that there are people to work with, especially when we look at the representatives in the Valley, and that's regardless of party. So I've been pretty happy to be able to reach out and hopefully have some partners to help our Valley.
Do you think that the change in the redistricting and open primaries is going to make any difference? Will that moderate the tone a little bit in Sacramento?
I don't know the effect of the tone certainly in Sacramento, but I would be very surprised if it didn't create a lot more truly competitive areas in our state instead of the way it's gerrymandered right now.
What do you think? Do you think it's going to change things in Sacramento?
I think it has great opportunity to. I have great hope.
Is it already impacting people because they're anticipating the change?
I think it is somewhat. It's so experimental that I think most legislators really don't know what to expect in terms of how it will change the dynamics. But I have a lot of hope in redistricting and open primaries that it will lead to more of a pragmatism in Sacramento. That's one of the great things about the Central Valley is we really work together in, I think, a pragmatic way to just improve the quality of life for our constituents.
Well, on that hopeful note, when we come back, we'll address some issues that have generated a lot of debate, the possible elimination of redevelopment agencies and enterprise zones. That conversation when we return. This is the Maddy Report.